Perfect. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. Super excited to have this webinar done on pre-funding retiree healthcare. And I am Glenn Colwell, Managing Partner with the New Advisors. We've recently had the opportunity to present to education event for a particular district for the International Association of Firefighters. And we got a lot of questions and information need out of that particular education event on this topic. We also had the opportunity to speak to a national police organization as they were asking questions about the retiree healthcare as well. So we thought we'd put on this webinar and record it for those that want the distribution after the fact to share with any of their colleagues. Again, Glenn Colwell with the New Advisors. New Advisors is a registered investment advisory firm. And in our public sector divisions, we focus on first responders, providing several different solutions, both on a state and local level, as well as an individual member level for investment advisory, as well as retirement in 457 space and pre-funding retirement healthcare through a VEBA solution. Today with me, I have Carney Adamson. Carney is from BPAS, and BPAS is a national provider of retirement plans, benefit plans, and fund administration. And Carney has been with them for 25 years? Or you've been in the business 25 years?
I've been in the business for 25 years, but been with BPAS specifically since 2016.
Okay, and how long have you been part of their VEBA solution?
Since 2016, specifically with BPAS, but my experience with VEBAs goes back to 1999.
Okay, great. So we have a wealth of knowledge on the call here. And I'm going to turn over to Carney to go through our presentation, and then there might be a time for a little bit of Q&A, and then we'll conclude then. So take it away, Carney.
Thanks, Glenn. So let's get started. Here are the things that I'm going to go through in this presentation. I had a mentor that said, Carney, always talk slower than you normally would. So that's what I'm going to do to make sure that you can hear everything that I might give to you, and you could write down some questions as you hear this webinar. So the first thing I want to talk about is, what does VEBA stand for? It's an acronym. Everybody loves an acronym. Voluntary Employees Beneficiary Association. So what that means is VEBA is a trust, and just starting here, it's a tax-exempt, irrevocable trust arrangement. So it's something that is established with the IRS to be tax exempt, to hold this type of plan as fully tax sheltered. So that's the biggest thing. I mean, a lot of people think about, well, is it like an HSA? Is it like an FSA? Which I'm going to talk about in my presentation, but just let's start here that it's a fully tax exempt, irrevocable trust, meaning once monies go out to the employee, they can't come back to the employer. They can't be subject to creditors. So that's the vehicle that allows for this plan. When I talk about VEBA and then the HRA component, allows for it to be fully tax sheltered. So the IRS is very much involved. So the other part of this is the healthcare reimbursement account, or HRA. So that's the part of the plan where we actually reimburse for eligible expenses. And if you're looking to put yourself to sleep at night, you can read any of these revenue rulings, but basically 213D expenses, once again defined by the IRS, are what are allowed for reimbursement under an HRA. And I'm going to go into a little bit more about what those expenses are and what plan design you can set up that can be tailored to what expenses you want to reimburse. But the full amount that's available under the IRS is 213D expenses. And you can Google that and take a look at those vast amount of expenses. So once again, employer contributions, the earnings that those contributions get while they're invested, and then the reimbursements or the claims that are paid are all tax exempt. So to put a VEBA together, which when I say VEBA, I mean VEBA HRA, these two pieces have to fit together. So it's your VEBA, the vehicle that allows for this IRS exemption of taxes. Under the VEBA, to be able to take advantage of that as an active employee, you have to have a group medical plan that you're enrolled in. It could be a plan that's offered by your employer. It can be a plan offered by your spouse's employer, but you just, as an active employee, you have to be enrolled in a group medical plan. When you go to retire, you don't have to be on a group medical plan. That restriction goes away when you separate service or retire with your VEBA, which our VEBA product, and most VEBA products are portable. They go with you when you leave. So that group medical plan requirement is only while you're actively employed. And then the HRA side is everything that allows us to reimburse, do the administration and reimbursement of claims. So just to give you an idea of what these expenses, these qualified expenses under that 213D code are under this VEBA HRA. So we're going to start over here while you're an active employee. So it's for any of those out-of-pocket expenses that you have in connection with your insurance, like deductible, copay, coinsurance, all those out-of-pocket expenses under your insurance plan are reimbursable. But there's also some expenses that maybe your insurance contract doesn't cover, but are still reimbursable expenses. Like you may have acupuncture under your plan, but it may be limited to a certain amount of treatments. Same thing with physical therapy or rehab. Those things may be restricted, but even beyond what your insurance contract covers, if you still have more than that, you can have that reimbursed under your VEBA. And some other things, especially in fire service, that may not be covered at all under a insurance contract are special eyeglasses or like hearing aids, hearing aid batteries. Lots of times those are excluded from an insurance contract, but there's still something that's reimbursable under a VEBA. And then once you go to separate service or retire from whoever's sponsoring the VEBA, the plan sponsor, the employer, in addition to all these expenses, you can also get reimbursed for post-employment insurance premiums. So when I get further into this presentation and we talk about plan design, we're going to like focus on what's it going to cost when you go to retire and have to buy your own healthcare coverage, even before Medicare. So say you're somebody who retires before Medicare eligible age, which is 65 for everybody right now. So when you have to go and buy your own medical, dental, vision insurance, those premiums that you pay are reimbursable under a VEBA. So you can start to see that saving up your VEBA and using it in retirement helps you bridge that gap until Medicare. And even after Medicare, when you're eligible for Medicare, those premiums and deductibles you pay in Medicare are reimbursable under the VEBA. And in addition, if you want to go get a Medicare SUP, which most everybody does, Medicare supplement plan, those are also reimbursable. And then lastly, and I went too far here, qualified long-term care insurance, which most all long-term care insurance premiums are qualified. If you happen to have that plan, those premiums are reimbursable as well. So you get a good idea of what the vast amount of expenses are reimbursable under these types of plans.
Hey, Carney, that's a good point. Like that's where we really see some interest from fire services and law enforcement. Most of the firefighters or officers retire in their early 50s and trying to bridge that gap before they become Medicare eligible and the cost of that. And then maybe you could touch on, I don't know if this is the right place, but how that plan really gets added to the participants and employees as a benefit. And typically in fire services and law enforcement, it's a bargained event. And maybe just touch on that. That'd be great.
Yeah, so yes, so many fire service, police service, because they have the ability to retire earlier based on active service years, which puts them below 65. Bridging that gap of having to go and find your own insurance. Like maybe you have access, you still have to pay for it, but at least you have access to a medical plan with your prior employer, or just wherever you can buy your insurance, which you're going to have to do. I don't think very many people go without insurance during that time between retirement and Medicare age. This is why so many of these plans have been set up specifically to address that gap between retirement age and Medicare age. And then, of course, as I've already explained, even in Medicare age, you still can get reimbursed for those parts of Medicare that you have to pay for and long-term care. And, there's different types of plans that are bargained, which I'm going to get to in plan design. But there's flexibility on plan design based on bargaining agreements or retiree liability situations, promises from employers. The VEBA IHRA can accommodate all those. Across our book of business, we have plans that pay whether you're an active employee or a retiree. We have plans that are set up that are just they're funded while you're active and they pay out when you retire. So just to give you an idea of how these plan designs come together. Speaking of plan designs, so let's just get into some of the details or some of the examples of what these plan designs can be. The first thing to think about when you talk about VEBA HRAs, so whenever you hear me say VEBA, it's VEBA HRAs, both parts of that puzzle piece. So VEBAs don't allow for individual election. And what I mean by that is that as a group, if it's a bargaining group, if you're an employer that has multiple bargaining groups, or you have bargaining groups plus non-represented people, those are groups of employees. So if you're offering the VEBA, then it has to be across the board. So your employees don't get to pick and choose. It's either you're in the VEBA getting contributions or you're not. So that's one of the first basis points of VEBAs. And then the eligibility is determined however the bargaining groups bargain or the agreements between employee and employers, that's determined at the plan sponsor level. So there's a little bit of flexibility there. It's like you don't have to take a certain plan design. You have some flexibility there. And as I already mentioned as an example, obviously you have bargain groups, but you can also allow your non-represented employees to join as a group. And you can have a combination of plan designs. So as a rounded out example of plan design, starting right up here, straight employer contribution, meaning as a bargaining group, you've bargained a certain contribution to a VEBA. And that money comes in. Frequency can be determined at the plan level, whether you bargain it or however you do that. It can be annually, it can be monthly, it can be quarterly. However you want to make that contribution, that's one of the plan options that you have. Another way that you can add money into VEBA is through mandatory salary deferral. So what that means is that as a group, as a bargaining group, say you may have already bargained a contribution amount from your employer, but as a group, you also want to put some more money into the VEBA. It's still employer dollars because, again, you don't have a choice by individual. But as a group, if you wanted to say, I want to defer a certain percentage of my payroll or a flat dollar amount into the VEBA, that's how we're going to fund the VEBA. So it could be this, it can be this, It can be both these things. Another contribution. Yeah.
Sorry, yeah, didn't mean to- So what we've seen frequently asked is, you bargain with the municipality and you get an increase of pay. And then out of that total increase of pay, maybe your representatives, your employee base, participant base says, okay, we get a 5% raise or a 3% raise. Of that, we're going to move, 2 of it straight to the VEBA.
Totally allowable.
Yeah.
Again, across the group, across the bargaining group or your non-represented group, yes, you can do that. We just have to have the language, the CBA language, or the agreement that shows that it's applied across the board and that everybody knows it's no individual election. An employee's never going to have the right to say, yeah, you could, I'll say either put it in my VEBA or I'm going to take it in cash. It's never going to be an option. If it's added to the plan as a contribution plan design, then it applies to everybody.
But it could be worded as such that out of that 5% raise, we'll take 2 in our payroll and then 3 into the VEBA.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, it's perfect design. Yeah, again, shows the flexibility in design, but because it applies across the group, it applies across the group. But yeah, you could say, yeah, so we got a 5% increase, but we'd like to take 2% of that to go directly to the VEBA. And why would I want to do that? Is because it's going to be tax sheltered. So as a group, you say, I'm going to take that raise and put 2% in my VEBA as a group, and understanding that the tax sheltering of that is very attractive, because otherwise, if you're taking it in payroll, you have all the payroll taxes that are going to hit that. In addition, employers, if they're making contributions to VEBA, either straight contribution, mandatory salary deferral, if they're making, however they're contributing to the VEBA, they also save on those payroll taxes that they have to pay. So it's a tax sheltering, not only for the participant, but for the employer.
Yeah, the benefits are on both sides. The money goes in basically tax free as long as it's used for a qualifying expense. It comes out, and the growth on the account with the underlying investments grows tax free as long as it's used for a qualifying expense. And then the employer gets the payroll tax deduction. So it's really a win-win for both sides.
Yes. Yes. And it's just good to think back when I started the presentation about the IRS is very involved, and you can see why is because there's and by the way, contributions into VEBA, there's no maximum. So whatever can be bargained, and you can use all these contribution options to make contributions to a VEBA, but there's no limit to how much that is. If you wanted to compare it to an HSA, which most people are familiar with, HSAs have very specific each year the contribution amount of what you can put into an HSA, which includes both employer and employee contributions. And I should have looked this up right before I got on here, but it's like, $3,500 for an individual and $7,500 per year for a family. So very limited on the HSA side, but on the VEBA side, it could be, I've worked with groups that have, when I'm going to start talking about sick leave conversion, it's very common in fire and police that they can accumulate conversion for the whole time that they're working and take it with them when they leave. And it can be large amounts of sick or vacation leave or PTO, however they define it. So that's a really attractive part of VEBAs, is that there's no contribution limit. Yeah, your participants have to think about is like, oh, okay, so we're talking about putting my $50,000 of sick leave conversion in, but I really was planning on using that for my next house or my vacation boat. So you just have to keep in mind that there's flexibility here, but it has to apply across the group, no individual election. So straight employer contribution, the mandatory salary deferral, conversion of sick or vacation leave are all contribution sources. And another one that's really popular is wellness or retirement incentives. And I've seen a lot of retirement incentives in the fire service and police service, just trying to move some members along so they can hire some younger members. And wellness credits. I have lots of plans that, you know, if you do a certain thing, you're going to get a wellness credit, and that can also be a VEBA contribution.
Yeah, I just two quick points on this slide before we move on. One is, I think, you know, from a municipality side, it's really a great attraction retention tool, as you mentioned, trying to move maybe the older generation of fire and police to retirement to help on budget, and then give them an incentive to do so. And then what we see on the employee side is just another benefit to help bridge the gap to retirement. I mean, the number one discussion we get is, can we afford retirement based upon our healthcare needs? So it's a great tool both ways.
Yeah, exactly. Can I retire? Yeah, maybe I can retire because I have enough in my 401k plan. But now when I see how much it's going to cost for my healthcare, I need to add that filter to when I'm calculating what I need for retirement. So that's why VEBAs have become so popular. So just some more examples of what's possible. So I'm going to start up here. And we've touched on this. So you could set up a plan that is strictly for when you go to retire. So however it's funded by the employer, they're going to make put this plan together, and then you can use the VEBA for post-employment. So we call it retiree medical savings accounts. Another example that's really common, and these are like the top 3 examples of our plan designs that we see across 200 consumer or 200 plans, that we have an employer that says, hey, I'm going to offer 2 plans to my employees. One is just a traditional PPO plan with like a $500 deductible. The other one's going to be a higher deductible plan, let's say $1,500. And it's not directed by the IRS. The plan design is determined by the employer, but I'm going to offer this other plan. And then if they take the higher deductible, then I'm going to add a VEBA contribution. And then they allow them to say you can use it while you're actively employed to bridge that gap in the deductible and coinsurance, or you can save it up till when you go to retire. What's interesting about the VEBA, most popular VEBA plan that we offer, it's participant directed accounts. And once the money comes into those accounts, it's up to the member to decide in this plan design whether they're going to use it while they're actively employed or save it till they retire. In this plan design, it's you can't go to use it until you retire. The last most popular design, and I don't have these in, you know, preference level, but is an employer that's funding a plan and determining eligibility based on years of service, which sounds, I'm sure, firefighters and police understand that. And maybe there's been some promises made in the past or have been bargained for retiree health insurance. So this can be a way of, it's funded while you're working and then you access it when you go to retire. So just kind of to give you an idea of what these plan designs look like. And there's even more between the last slide and this. There's just lots of different ways you can design your plan. And I'm just going to go back here for a minute. You could start a VEBA plan with one source of contribution, a straight employer contribution, let's say an annual contribution amount each year. Down the road, you can add, if you want to add some mandatory salary deferral, if the group of employees, the bargaining group says, yeah, we understand now how this VEBA works. We want to take advantage of the tax sheltering. So we'd like to defer some of our salary to add to that. So that's a separate decision or a separate bargaining thing. And then conversion of sick leave or vacation leave, again, I mentioned in the past or before, is that, everybody has an idea of what they're going to do with their accumulated leave, but it might take them a while as a group to say, we see the tax advantages of this. So we want to add this. So you don't have to, just because you start with one source doesn't mean you can't add other sources of contributions to the VEBA. So how to set up a VEBA, and this is not really, all this can happen concurrently, or depending on how you are going to bargain this. But it's at BPAS, to establish a VEBA, if you were to pick us as an administrator, we do all the steps to establish the VEBA trust, contacting the IRS, getting the determination letter from the IRS. All that's done at BPAS. So you have to establish a VEBA trust. We do that every day, day in and day out. You have to determine your plan design. So all those things I talked about what are going to be the contributions, who's going to define the eligibility. It's not BPAS that would determine the eligibility. It would be whatever it's bargained or determined at the plan sponsor level. And then educating the members, just talking to them about how a VEBA works. You have the IRS involved on this. So there are strings attached to using especially a debit card to being reimbursed. And I will say that at BPAS, we spend a lot of time setting expectations and educating your employees and members just so they understand, yes, we're going to give you this debit card, but we may need some more information after you swipe that debit card. Again, it goes back to the IRS and substantiating every single claim. But all these things, besides determining the plan design, all these things, if you choose the BPAS product, are done at BPAS. The only thing that's left on the table for the plan sponsor or the employer is letting us know who's on the plan or who's left the plan and making the contributions. So the rest of that is taken care of by BPAS. And so some common concerns and obstacles, and I've already touched on this, but probably the first one is, you have to bargain it or show the need or the advantage of adding a VEBA IHRA to your employee benefit lineup. So the one explanation or example I showed before about, having two plan choices, and the second plan choice has a higher deductible, more out of pocket, but the employer's adding a VEBA. Out here in the Pacific Northwest, that's a really popular plan design. And now we're seeing it across the nation too, is that employers are trying to, save on premiums, like we all know, and they want to offer a higher deductible, coinsurance, whatever plan, but they can't encourage people to move to that plan unless they bridge that gap, and they do that with a VEBA. So funding for a new employee benefit is kind of your starting point.
We also see, a lot of negotiating between, I would say, the unions and the employers, municipalities of, $1 on benefit spend, where do they spend that dollar? And healthcare is a big issue of seeing taken away from, especially newer members or different classes of benefits. So it's becoming a great bargaining discussion to have on both sides of the table.
Exactly. The other thing is VEBAs are not like an HSA. So most people are familiar with an HSA, healthcare savings account. So that's kind of their starting point when they are thinking about how does this VEBA work? I'm familiar with an HSA. VEBAs are different. Same expenses are reimbursable, but as I mentioned before, plan design under VEBA can be whatever plan design it doesn't even have to be a high deductible plan. It just has to be a group plan. HSAs have a specific plan design that the government determines, the IRS determines. It has a, a deductible and an out-of-pocket and co-insurance limitations that you have to abide by. And of course, there is a limitation on how much money you can put into a HSA. So VEBAs are not like an HSA. And I will tell you also, if you're a group that offers an HSA and wants to bring in a VEBA, VEBAs are considered healthcare, other healthcare coverage. So VEBAs affect the ability to be able to be in an HSA with contributions. So in other words, they don't play well together. So it's something to look at, that those two plans don't operate great together. The IRS again limits certain things. And so if you already have an HSA in place, you have to be really familiar with what you have to do with the VEBA if you're going to add that. And you can add the VEBA. It would just be on a limited scope or restricted during that time that you're eligible for an HSA. Educating members and beneficiaries. So again, setting expectations of how you access your plan with a debit card. When you do it, it's a big piece of this plan, is just making sure that people understand how this plan works. And typically people are rolling out these types of plans at open enrollment when all the rest of their stuff's going on. Their new healthcare plan, their other plans that are new, or their voluntary life insurance that they have to update. So it's adding another complexity to the employee benefit lineup. So it's good to just know, VEBAs do not have to be in a line with your healthcare plan's plan year. So if you have a healthcare plan that's January to December, which majority of them are, you can start your VEBA whenever. It does not have to align with your healthcare plan. And in fact, I think it's better if you don't align it with the healthcare plan, unless you're of course offering a plan that a dual option, that one includes the VEBA contribution and the other one doesn't. And then one of the biggest obstacles, which I've already talked about, is we do offer a debit card. It doesn't have to be offered, but most people like using that, where they can go and swipe their debit card at the pharmacy, at the doctor's office. It is a Visa-backed debit card, credit card, to substantiate a claim or to access your VEBA account real time, but it comes with strings attached. So we need more information than just the debit card swipe to take care of what the IRS requires us to get to substantiate a claim. So I would say, of all these, this is the biggest pain point when you're talking about VEBAs and HRAs. But again, you've got a fully tax sheltered plan with no limit on how much money you can put in there based on bargaining or as a group. So I think that a lot with the education and really talking about the debit card up front helps level those expectations, and then everybody understands what this means and what they have to do to take advantage of this plan. I think that's my last slide.
Perfect. Thank you, Carney. I guess the last thing I would stress before we go here is just really the tax advantages. Again, the money goes in tax-free. It's invested tax-free and it comes out tax-free as long as you're using it for one of those qualified expenses. But the great math example I think you've shared in the past with clients is putting a certain contribution in, like the sick pay conversion, right? So I think it was like 25,000 you put in. You don't pay Fed taxes on this. So let's say you're in the 25% tax bracket and you don't pay the FICA tax on it. That's 30+% tax that you're not having to pay and using those funds towards an expense that you're going to have. And so driving that home is huge. And then having the employer not pay that payroll tax on it too. It really is a win-win for both sides.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to summarize it. Yeah, I would agree.
Great. Thank you for your time, Carney. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Glenn. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity.
Great. Take care.
Bye.